We are talking Strain 100. This one is directed by Hassan Hussein. And this is a movie for all you anti-vaxxers out there. So this is essentially a zombie film. It looks to be influenced by Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, because it almost feels like it's a comparable movie in regards to its attempted style and story to that particular film. Now, the story focuses on this particular young lady called Jessie, whose mother, we learn through some exposition, is a scientist who has fed her lots of pills and shots when she was younger, and she apparently is immune to this zombie virus. Now, interestingly, the zombie virus actually comes around because the government gave out a vaccine to a kind of a flu-like virus that happened to be floating around at the time. I wonder what that could be. And it inevitably mutated and thus turned people into zombies. And the vast majority of people have obviously taken this vaccine and now turned into zombies. The remainder are surviving but can still be turned into zombies via kind of zombie bites. Now, the story focuses on this character, Jessie, and ultimately she goes from place to place, meeting different groups of people, and that's kind of the story. Now, when I was kind of having a look at this film, I had a look at some of the reviews, which I try not to do before I watch a film. And this is one of those films, if you look at the IMDb user ratings, that it's got either 1s and 2s or 9s and 10s. And like the 9s and 10s are clearly, you know, people involved in the film or the kind of production, things like this. And the 1s and the 2s are always kind of like the people go, ignore those fake reviews, etc., etc. And I have to say, when I started to watch this movie, I was thinking, I don't know, this movie doesn't really feel like it's like a 1 or a 2. It feels like it's going to be better than that. But then the movie doesn't go anywhere, and the plot continues not to go anywhere, doesn't go anywhere, and then suddenly the movie ends and they have a little epilogue saying, and that's basically what happened in the rest of the film. So it kind of feels like they made part of a movie or are intending to make a sequel, and they just run out of money and then just kind of tack this ending on. That's what it feels like, I don't know. But what can we say that works, first of all? Now, for a low-budget film, I will say I was impressed with some of the scale here. There is a couple of sequences where we do see, you know, things like, you know, abandoned fire trucks and things like this. And there's an attempt here to have, you know, the world in chaos and in ruin, things like that. And although it's, you know, only and ever in a few kind of sequences, I did appreciate the attempt here to have this, you know, run down world and kind of like abandoned stuff and things like that. And, you know, when you see shots like that, it does give it a sense of scale to a degree, because it kind of looks like, oh, you know, they've obviously got a few kind of, you know, car parks made and look like they're crashed and stuff like that, and rubbish everywhere. And I think it does some good set dressing. So I would say I quite enjoyed some of the set dressing here. And as I've mentioned, the movie seems like it's almost like filmed as a companion piece, at least, the Dawn of the Dead style, because the zombies are kind of the faster moving. It feels like that movie in respect that you kind of meet lots of different sort of characters through the movie. And obviously the Walking Dead TV show as well, there's elements I feel that work like that. Not only do we have the threat of zombies, but there seems to be some equally, if not worse, kind of humans along the way as well. So the movie does seem like it's influenced by modern zombie films. There's quite a lot of extras here and there. We have kind of lots of shots of zombies kind of running past and things like this. And I thought our main actress was relatively likeable as well, actually. I thought she didn't do too bad a job. She isn't the most amazing actress ever, I'm not saying that, but I thought she made for a likeable kind of main protagonist, at least, who the movie actually is asking a lot from this actress, because there is quite a lot of dialogue in this movie, believe it or not. And you know, I didn't mind some of the kind of the zombie makeup either. It's not brilliant, but again, for a low budget movie, it's not just kind of people with cut up shirts and kind of like, you know, white face paint, stuff like that. There were a couple of sequences I thought, you know, the zombie makeup didn't look kind of too bad. But let's talk about what doesn't work. Okay, so I've already said it, but it bears repeating again. There's really no plot here. There's a skeleton of a plot, and it feels like they had this kind of idea mapped out where Jessie seems to be immune. She actually, we discover early on, there's not really a spoiler here, that she does have a bite, but it seems to be not affected to it. And it's not really mentioned again until right at the end in the kind of the epilogue. And then it's just a case of meeting various people, some of which may be kind of, you know, allies, some of which may be a hindrance, all of whom never really kind of stay around for very long, to be honest with you. So you kind of never really get too attached to them. But I've got to say, you know, despite the fact this has got relatively kind of large cast, because we're introduced to so many people, there's a hell of a lot of kind of like exposition and dialogue that is in this movie. In fact, you're itching at times to have things happen in the movie, action to happen, because although, you know, this movie is not a slow-paced film, it's certainly not a slow burn movie, there's just a hell of a lot of sit-down dialogue for characters you know very little about, and therefore don't really care about. And I have to say, to be honest with you, there are a real mixed bag of acting ability here. Some of the acting is super over-delivered. We have this guy at the beginning who kind of runs this diner, and this is really I suppose, the second group of people that Jessie comes across. Obviously, is with the first group. And he's like super overacting, and like there's a couple of other characters that are in that kind of like that scene. Again, mega overacting, but in particular this kind of this restaurant owner. But then on the flip side, I think probably the second to last group, or kind of like, you know, lot of people that you'll come across. There's like a guy who seems to be obsessed with guns, and he doesn't feel like he's acting. He just feels like they've got some guy who can't actually act, and he just feels like he's talking to this girl, which I've got to be honest, seems pretty sort of, you know, realistic at times, but I think it's more by chance. He's just kind of, you know, talking and doesn't really know how to act, and therefore ends up kind of, you know, some of the dialogue doesn't really make sense that you would say in a natural situation. So there is a little force, but it kind of just feels like this guy isn't an actor, is he? He's just a guy who who's just saying a bunch of lines. But it almost seems more believable because of that. And in between, we have a variety of people. We spend the most time with this kind of like this young girl and her slightly older brother. The movie keeps going off in these little detours for some reason that we never really get explained. It almost feels like it's a season of The Walking Dead piled into one kind of like hour-and-a-half movie, and just had lots of kind of like character moments edited out. For example, we have a scene where we have this young lad who's the kind of the older brother of this little girl who is at one point Jessie's hanging around with these two, and he kind of runs off to try and get the zombies to follow him, and he's shot at by a bunch of people. Like, we never really know who they are and things like that. They're just shooting at this guy for driving a truck for some reason. We don't know why or why they're shooting. Things like this. So the movie just feels like it's really just a collection of random encounters that this Jessie has. And it's just then bundled together to try and make a movie. They've run out of money and then quickly tied it up at the end. Where it actually starts to get a little bit of plot progression, ironically. Okay, but what else can we say? So, the other thing I think is immediately apparent is the over-reliance on CGI effects. Now, there's not CGI creatures or anything like that, but there's an overuse of CGI blood, you know, blood squibs, things like bullets, you know, shooting off things like that. And in the sequences, if we take, for example, the CGI blood, they would have been better off just simply not having those at all and just not having the blood come out at all. There is a couple of instances where they do use practical blood, although it just looks like too liquid. It looks just like water, to be honest with you. But at least it's better than the CGI blood. But for the most part, it's CGI blood. They just would have been better off not having these bloody explosions at all. Just have it, you know, people just react to things and that, right? Because it just looks so terrible. Sometimes, you know, you have these, I think low budget movies have access to these kind of cheap CGI packages and things like that, and they feel obliged to put them in, and they just need to hold back and sometimes think, you know, if it doesn't look particularly good, if it looks particularly shit, then just don't have it. Just have people kind of reacting to the make-believe impact of things, because it does look better, you know, there's no way around it. And I had to be honest with you, until that point, until I saw these kind of like these lower budget bloody explosions, CGI explosions, I didn't think the movie was too bad. This is what I mean. I was kind of like, why is this kid getting 1s or 2s? I didn't think it started off too bad, if I'm honest with you. It uses a kind of like stock footage and things like those news clippings to create a sense of scale, and it's fairly well integrated. And then we kind of get our kind of set up with our first kind of group of characters, which is in this campsite. And I'm thinking, this isn't too bad a movie, if I'm honest, so far. And then we start seeing the kind of the cheapness in regards to some of the kind of the blood squibs. And then kind of it just carries on. You realise the plot isn't going to go anywhere. The zombies are a mixed bag. They just kind of, again, some overacting in some of these kind of zombies, like trying to be too kind of like, ugh, and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it's pretty much a fairly typical low-budget sci-fi channel movie about zombies. It's kind of what it feels like. I think this movie was probably shot fairly quickly and suffers because of that. And it almost had the potential to fool us into thinking it would have been a little bit more sophisticated than it actually is, had it had a little bit more care and attention, a little bit more subtlety in its kind of filmmaking. I do think if they dialed back on some of the more cheesy elements, some of the cheesier acting, made the characters a little bit more interesting, you know, maybe not have the kind of CGI blood, it actually could have been a reasonable zombie film. And, you know, obviously I say the main problem here is the plot doesn't go anywhere until right at the end, and where it just kind of ends. But I feel that it could, you know, a few tweaks here and there, and it actually wouldn't have got these 1s and 2s that it got in the IMDb. Now, to be honest with you, I always think I hate hyperbole reviews. Ones that are, it's a bloody amazing, blah, or it's totally rubbish, because you can always find, you know, gradients in things. I don't think this movie is a 1 out of 10. There's still some enjoyable elements here, and I've certainly seen worse. But obviously it's certainly not going to be a 10 out of 10 either. So I try to avoid these reviews, and that's how I would kind of look at stuff when I do review myself, that just to be very extreme one or the other, to be honest with you, unless the movie is genuinely deserving of either a 1 or a 10, which is very rare, because there's always things you can find that do work well in a way in some low budget films, and very few films are faultless. So, but as it stands at the moment, this movie is a below average film, don't get me wrong. The frustrating thing with me with this movie, I think it was fairly close to at least being an okay film, but it just missed the mark. Had it just adjusted a few things here and there, I honestly think this movie could have been at least an average zombie film, or maybe even above average, but as it stands, it is not. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.